Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
We are facing the most serious threat to public media in history. Right now, the White House is trying to rescind already approved funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, money that keeps stations like ours running. Without it, essential local journalism, trusted reporting, and podcasts like this are all at risk. If you value public media, speak up now. Visit boisestatepublicradio.org/funding to learn more and take action.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. We all know Idaho is growing. We see it every day in traffic, at our schools, and in a need for more housing. But just how much has Idaho's population expanded? Over the past 5 years, all of Idaho's counties have seen a growth in population. And in the past 25 years, we've grown by more than 50%. So, how much has Idaho grown, and what's causing the majority of the population shift? The James A. and Louise McClure Center for Public Policy Research decided to take a deep dive into those numbers with their new policy brief called Idaho at a Glance, Population Change in Idaho. And the author of the brief, McClure Center economist Liz Bagent, is here to break it down for us. Liz, nice to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, how much has our population grown over the past 25 years?
So, since 2000, Idaho's population has grown by about 700,000 people, and that's about 54%. We went from 1.3 million to 2 million people as of 2024.
That puts a lot in perspective when you think about everything that we're seeing, right? As I mentioned, traffic, housing. So, Liz, I'm curious, what's causing the majority of this population growth in the state?
So, the short answer is migration, people from other states moving to Idaho. The slightly longer answer is that from a demography perspective, you can get population growth from people moving in, and you can get population growth from people having babies. And in Idaho, it's really that migration effect of people moving into the state that's driving our population growth.
And where are people moving from? You said other states. Do we know specifically?
Yeah, so the top state for people moving to Idaho is California. But we also have a lot of exchange with Washington and Oregon. So we have a lot of people moving from Washington to Idaho, and also people moving from Idaho to Washington, and similar with Oregon.
Okay, so we still have people leaving Idaho going to places like Washington and Oregon, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, migration is sort of a function of people coming and people going. And at the end of the year, you have to ask yourself, did more people come or more people go, and by how much? And that's the sort of migration number that the Census Bureau and other entities track.
So I want to talk next about the people who were coming into the state, because there were two things that stood out in your study. So first, let's talk about this. The folks that are moving here tend to match Idaho's racial and ethnic composition. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, they're about 85% white and 13% Hispanic.
And the second thing was people who move to Idaho tend to be Republican. What are the numbers on that?
Yeah, so between 2015 and 2024, 66% of people moving to Idaho who registered to vote registered as Republicans, compared to 21% unaffiliated and 12% Democrat. But this doesn't necessarily encompass everyone who moved to Idaho, because not everyone registers to vote.
Okay, so what information then can we glean from that, since, as you said, not everyone registers to vote when they move into a state?
It's tough to say. The people who don't register, we don't know what their political affiliation might be. There's also a lot of young people who are too young to register, like people's children. As far as the general shift in the state since 2015, we've seen a shift from Republican from where we've always had a lot of Republicans in Idaho, but there are more.
Hmm.
And some of this might be attributed to population change, migration of people who are registering as Republicans, but at the same time, anyone can change their political affiliation at any time. So it's difficult to really pin that down.
So I want to talk next about the areas in Idaho that have grown the most. I mean, yeah, it's obvious that Boise has boomed and continues to be booming. With that said, there's no way that all 700 plus thousand people moved to the Treasure Valley. So are there other parts of this state that have grown as well?
Yeah, so we see when we look at the county level, we see growth across the state over the last 10 years, and then in the last few years, even more more consistent growth. Um, so the growth is really concentrated in three parts of the state that are near the largest cities in Idaho. So in North Idaho,
Hmm.
near Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai, Bonner, and Boundary County are growing pretty quickly, and that's between 2 and 3%, which is a pretty high growth rate. Near Boise, Ada, Canyon, Boise County, and Gem County are growing pretty quickly, and then just north, Valley and Adams are also growing at a clip. And near Idaho Falls, Bonneville, Madison, Jefferson, and Teton counties as well.
So you said that most of our counties rather saw growth, but a few didn't. So can we talk about that?
Mhm.
Because why is it important to watch these counties that are specifically losing population?
Yeah, so Idaho is a pretty rural state, and across rural America, a lot of places are losing population. Generally speaking, Idaho is doing pretty well on that front. But there are a couple of counties, Clark County and Lewis County, that over the course of 10 years lost population. However, if you look a little bit closely, you see that in the last couple of years, the trend has turned. So we'll see what happens with
Hmm.
those counties. But
Okay.
in general, go ahead.
No, you finish your thought. Sorry.
Okay. In general, losing population has some implications for the economy. It has implications for tax revenues. The more people we have, the more demand there is for goods and services that people need to live their lives. That creates opportunities for businesses and jobs, and that sort of fuels the economy in sort of a synergistic way. And when people start to leave or die off, the fewer people we have, the fewer businesses we can support, and the economy sort of moves in the other direction. And tax revenues also sort of work in that same way.
So when we talk about economics, you mentioned that it definitely has an impact when we see people moving out of certain counties, et cetera. So I'm curious, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but let's say you take Lewis and Clark counties and they saw people leave. I mean, now it seems to be stabilizing. But even if people were to continue to leave a couple of counties in the state, how would then the economy would the economy just be impacted potentially in those counties that are losing population, or would it be like a kind of a domino effect where we would see it impacting the economy statewide?
I probably can't speculate too hard on that, but I would say that Idaho is in a pretty strong position when it comes to growth, and population decline
Hmm.
is maybe more of a local concern than a state level concern at this point.
So I know you crunched a lot of numbers during this to get this brief ready. Where did you get some of your data from?
So a lot of our data, we use a combination of administrative data and survey data from a few different sources, like the Census Bureau tracks a lot of population indicators, and the American Community Survey looks at population characteristics. And then we got data on births and deaths from the Department of Health and Welfare, the National Center for Health Statistics, and things like that.
So you mentioned birth rates. You did find that birth rates here in Idaho are declining. By how much?
So Idaho's birth rate has been declining since 2007. And at that time, I think it was 83 births per 1,000 women of reproductive age. And now it's down to 58. So that is a 30% decline.
Mm.
And that's a little bit faster than the national rate, but we're still a little higher. We have a higher birth rate than the national rate at this point, but we're converging.
So were there any counties in Idaho where the birth rate is not falling?
There are a few that don't appear to have declined. Adams, Camas, Clearwater, Lincoln, and Oneida.
So, one of the things that stood out to me as well in your study is that you found that the people who are moving into our state tend to be younger overall. Um, Not too surprising if you're walking around downtown Boise. I mean, I think you can see it in certain urban areas. But I still think that was a bit of a surprising statistic. So, with that said, are we becoming a younger state?
That's a great question. So it's true that the people moving into the state are generally a bit younger than the people who are already here on average. I think it's about 80% are under 55. And we are still aging as a state. So what
Mm.
that means is that the proportion of older people is growing, the proportion of younger people is declining, despite all of these on average younger people moving into the state.
Liz, why is it important to do studies like these?
Well, I think that understanding the composition of your population at any given time is really important because in terms of knowing what sort of services to provide to people, what is the population going to need if the population is aging, who's going to take care of your parents and your grandparents? Do we have enough young people to do that? There's sort of a planning ahead factor that comes with some of this
Hmm.
demography stuff. Thinking about how many teachers will we need in our schools if we are having fewer and fewer children, whether our tax revenues are going to be able to support the needs of the changing population in the state, things like that.
Before I let you go, was there anything that stood out to you or anything that may have been a bit surprising to you when you finally had the results of this of this study?
I think to me, the Idaho specific thing that stood out is that our rural counties are growing for the most
Mm.
part. And this is unusual in the US. So about half of rural counties in the US are declining or not growing. So Idaho is really doing something different in its rural areas, or something different is happening there. And I think that that is a pretty exciting finding in some ways, and something that we want to keep an eye on because it has a lot of impacts.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us about this. We've been speaking with economist Liz Bagent with the James A. and Louise McClure Center for Public Policy Research, discussing her new study, which is called Idaho at a Glance: Population Change in Idaho. You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudette.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.